Hey everybody, it's Scott. I'm here with a surprise bonus episode for you. I got an opportunity to speak a couple days ago with the co-creator and co-author of Claudia Christian's Dark Legacies project, which includes short stories, comic books, games, whatever you can think of, they're doing it with this project. Chris McAuly is an amazing guy who I really enjoyed speaking with. He's going to spend the first part of the interview talking about the project with Claudia and also some of his other projects. And then we are going to start talking about Babylon 5 and his experiences with the show. For those who are new to Babylon 5, have no fear. I'm going to give you a spoiler warning before we get into anything that could be spoiler topic-y. So please enjoy the first part of the interview, and then if you don't want to talk about Babylon 5 in terms of spoilers, go ahead and drop out at that point. In either case, I hope you like, share, subscribe, follow, all the things you can do with this, as well as most importantly, please leave us a review on your app or on YouTube or whatever you're using for this podcast. It really does help us grow the show. And then also, be sure to check out the links to Chris's projects, including Claudia Christian's Dark Legacies, down in the show notes so you can help them out as well. Thank you so much for joining us for this bonus interview, and then we will be back next week for our normally scheduled podcast. Thanks, everybody.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the break house.
And so it begins.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to Gray 17, a Babylon 5 podcast, a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. And we are here with a bonus episode, and I'm here with Chris McAuly, who is co-author of the Dark Legacies. I guess we call it a universe, Chris, because you've got a lot of stuff going on, but I'll let you tell us what the projects are. And what we usually do here on the B5 side of things is ask our folks who join us two questions, and that is, who are you and what do you want? So we'll start there.
Who am I? I don't know yet. I'm still cooking. I'm 40. I turned 40 this year. So I'll tell you who I was. I studied ancient Near Eastern history at university. I wanted to be an archaeologist. That didn't work out, so I had to try something more practical. So I went into IT. I was in IT for a long time, and then moved into video games and story, thanks to Pat Mills, and went into comic book illustration, comic colouring, and then video game programming, and then video game narrative, and now, franchise runner, I suppose. So that's who I was. Who am I? I'm a husband, somebody who loves his cat very dearly. I think I'm a very lucky individual. I think I found my calling in life. I think I found something that has made me very happy for the last few years, for the last 4 years. And so that's maybe who I am, a very happy and lucky and appreciative individual. What was your second question?
Oh, I think you got them both. I said, who are you? What do you want? What I want?
That's quite a loaded question. What do I want? For others to experience what I experience at a daily basis, for everybody to achieve their dream, to be happy, and to really realize their potential. But if you're listening to this and you're wondering, you've got all these great ideas and you're wondering what to do with them, do something with them, for God's sake. Life is too short. Trust me, I know that. I think that's what I want. I want people to genuinely follow. Was it Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss? It's probably the best piece of advice. That's what I really want.
Great. Now let's talk Dark Legacies.
Yeah, I think collectively it's really Claudia Christian's universe. So I'm the co-creator, co-author, and business partner of Claudia's. And we've crafted this sort of universe. So we've got science fiction, we've got horror, we've got fantasy, and in December we're deploying cyberpunk as well.
I've been kind of reading up on you all as we've been playing tag here for the past couple of weeks, and it sounds like you've got a lot of fingers in the pie here. We've got the Kickstarter for the comic book, which closed down here in August, and you guys got the first issue of that, and then working on issue 2. You've also got the novella. You've got all of that. So I think the first bit would be telling us about how you got into this and how you started working with Claudia on both this and also, as you mentioned before we started recording, the Babylon quiz book as well too. So you've been in this world for a bit.
Yeah, Claudia and I have been friends for about 7 years now. So as somebody I started writing about 7 years ago. I was very lucky. I was mentored by the person who created 2000 AD, Pat Mills. I worked on Judge Dredd. I worked with several other sort of major comic book writers during that time, thanks to Pat. And Claudia and I had sort of connected because I reached out because a family member was having an issue of alcohol. So everybody knows what C3 Foundation and Claudia does there. I have to be honest with you. I didn't know who Claudia was at that time. I didn't put two and two together. Later, we'll probably get into my experience with Babylon 5. But, she was very supportive. We became great friends. And last year, I took on the Dracula franchise with Bram Stoker's great grandnephew, Decker Stoker, and invited her on to one of our all-star audios. So we have an audio called Voices of Dracula. It's like a pinpoint of things that happened during the original novel from the perspective of Renfield's Van Helsing, Mina Harker, and Dracula, and a new character that I put in, simply called the Thief, and I crafted it for Claudia, invited her on, and she was very enamored with my writing style. We get into a conversation last, probably August time, and she said, "Could you write me a science fiction universe?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go for it." I didn't really stop there. It started with a science fiction universe, and then I discovered she enjoyed fantasy as well, especially Irish fantasy, and then I started writing that, and then it moved into the comic books and audio dramas. So we are connected with the worlds of Doctor Who. We created the Cyberon audio drama together. She voiced one of them. Doctor Who's Davros is a friend of mine, Terry Malloy, and he voiced the other. Mm-hmm. And now we're moving on to Cyberpunk. It's to be honest with you, I'll be completely honest, it's a bit head spinning because I didn't plan for all of this, and it's just happened. I mean, we've dipped our toes into, if you follow Claudia's Facebook, you'll see we've dipped our toes into Lovecrafts. We also created a property called Three Musketeers versus Cthulhu, which went from a story in an anthology that, I'm completely honest, it was a bit of a throwaway story, and now it's become a comic book and an RPG. So it can be a bit head spinning when I talk about it all, but it came from the original premise of can we write a science fiction universe together? Can we build something on that?
And it's your background is very interesting in that, and I think that lends itself to what you're talking about here and having multiple different genres kind of come together. The Kickstarter for Dark Legacies says The Expanse meets The Terminator meets Blade Runner in a hard-hitting action sci-fi comic book thriller. And what you're saying here is the same kind of idea, just kind of taking all those different genres that have cultures amongst themselves and finding a way to stitch together a tapestry. And it sounds really interesting to me. And I'm sure it's fun as hell to write just because you get to kind of dabble in a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on the Terminator. I worked on the official Terminator RPG and its upcoming sequel as well. And that's all. Everything that I write becomes canon in Terminator lore through the license holders.
You're just going to drop that there, by the way? Everything I write becomes canon? Nice.
Yeah, it was weird for me as well. It's just, it was a lot of fun because we had, the game company had the Malibu, I think it was the Malibu comics. We had definitely had Dark Horse comics rights. So that was fun. So I tried to incorporate a lot of that in there as well. So I think that's where the whole Terminator, the publisher is like, oh, it's a Terminator. And it's really its own thing. I write for fun, and I write for people to find joy in the universe and to just have fun with it. And I'm looking to entertain people. I'm not like the great maker. I don't try and put messages anywhere. I don't have, like, to be honest with you, I don't have a massive story arc of things that I write. But I do it for fun, and I'm doing this for Babylon 5 fans. I'm one of them. And it's just so much fun to work with the cast of Babylon 5 and craft their characters and create this whole universe. Yeah.
Okay, Al, I promised you that when we got to spoilers, I'd warn you. We're getting there right now. So, if you have not gone past where we are in season 1, which is Signs and Portents, leave now, because we're going to start spoiling stuff that happens throughout the entire show. Now, if you have seen Babylon 5 or you don't care about spoilers, continue on. Chris is going to start talking about his experience with Babylon 5, and it is an amazing story of utilizing pop culture to understand the world around you. So if you are okay with spoilers, stick around, and if not, thanks for joining us, and be sure to check out the show notes where I have information about how you can find out more about Dark Legacies, Claudia Christian and Chris McAuly's project that is full steam ahead. So check it out, and we'll continue on with the interview. Thanks. And you say good working with the cast of Babylon 5. Your stretch goal, which you hit on the Kickstarter, was an alternate cover with Bruce Boxleitner.
Yes.
And I know you've got some other things up your sleeve that we can't talk about yet, but that's exciting stuff that you got going here, kind of bringing those folks into this as well too.
Bruce is a gem. I have to say, Bruce is a Prince Long man. He's everything you've ever thought he would be, and probably more. I have a great love of the Western genre. So Claudia was like, no, Bruce, you've got to come on board. This is a whole lot of fun. So I've written him as a Martian marshal. We've kind of cheekily called this Martian Law. Actually, this section of it, the actual story name is And Hell Followed Him. So if you were a Kickstarter backer, you get the story, this kind of exclusive story that Bruce and I wrote together. And he schooled me in a lot of old-fashioned Western. So, Gunsmoke. Stuff he was actually involved with, Gunsmoke, Red River, Gods and Generals, all of that stuff that he's been involved with as Westerns. He came to me and he said, okay, go and watch this, Searchers, go and watch all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I did. And I came up with the character and I wrote it for him. And he loved it. I was very lucky. But he's a very generous individual as well. He gives a lot of his time. And, he's been a hero of mine for a while, since he was a kid. I mean, we all remember him from Tron. But he loves the whole aspect of Dark Legacies. He's getting his own spin-off comic. I think I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, he's getting his own spin-off comic. So if you were a Kickstarter backer, you'll get the first story. But there'll be lots more of them in issue 2. And also we have agreed that his character gets a spin-off comic next year. That's awesome. And I was, and we're going to talk about your experience with B5 here in a second too. For me, I was there at the beginning with 93 and 94. But when the changeover happened in season 2, bringing
Boxleitner on and adding him to the cast was just a dynamic shift that was an amazing way to continue the story, even though there was some obviously stuff behind the scenes going on. And I also, as a history nerd, the fact that you mentioned Gods and Generals, I always love the fact that he pops up in there as well too, as Longstreet. I'm a big fan of a big Gettysburg Gods and Generals. I'm upset we never got Last Full Measure, but I'm okay. And as you kind of discussed already, you've got a background with Babylon 5. I'd love to hear where you joined into this fandom and your experience with the show and how that led you to this point as well too.
I was 10 years old and it was playing on UK's Channel 4 and it was very haphazard. So you would get it, I think the Gathering was on at like midnight. And my family didn't have VHS players. We were the typical poor Irish of the 90s. We didn't have anything like that. But, you know, I think we played season 2 and 3 on Sunday. So like they had a sci-fi film that played before it. So I can vaguely remember Peter Cushing's Dalek movies kind of been spun around. We had The Blob, we had, you know, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and then we would have an episode of Babylon 5 running at 6 o'clock on Sunday. And I hated the thought of going to school on a Monday. So I used to eat all this stuff up. But I didn't have a massive memory of these things because I suppose I was quite young. But I did remember Londo and Shakar. And the reason I remembered them, Northern Ireland's a very divided society. So why we hate people in Northern Ireland is because they're of a different religion. So you're a Catholic or Protestant. And I was growing up in a time where people were, like, there was bombs going off on my streets. You know, as a kid, you would have gone through the bomb craters to get to your school, shootings, there was daily killings, all sorts of things. It was a terrible time, but it was just normal for me. And I was taught to hate the quote unquote other side. And I watched the storyline between Shakar and Londo between season 2 and season 3. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I didn't have to hate anymore at 10 years of age. And I could see the pain. So there was something about the character of Londo and Shakar. Like, Londo was very patriotic. I mean, it was, you know, he had a lot of pain. I think it was quite individual pain, and that he'd been passed over, and you know, nobody thought very much of him, and that was why he was in Babylon 5. And then the pain of Shakar, which was probably an ancestral pain of all the trying not to swear here, all crap.
Don't worry about it.
So all the shit that had gone on with the Narns, right? So, you know, the Catholic and the Protestant side in Ireland. And I watched this thing every Sunday, and I couldn't tell you anything about what was going on with Babylon 5, but I could tell you what was going on with Shakar and Londo. And I was like laser focus. So this is why I didn't know who Claudia was when I first chatted to her, because that didn't matter at the time. It was just Londo and Shakar, because they spoke very, very deeply to me. And that was my relationship with Babylon 5. It was very personal. It changed me. And I think, you know, JMS, I mean, I have to pay tribute to him because he basically changed my life. He changed my perspective on the world, that I realized I didn't have to hate anymore. And that was very powerful. And so that was my first dealings with Babylon 5.
Yeah, and I agree with you on, because I will point out I'm about to turn 40 as well too, so we're about the same age, sadly. But it's the same way for me as well too, in the fact that I have bits and pieces of memory of catching this thing. Of course, for us in the U.S., it was on PTEN, and you were lucky if you figured out when it was going to be on at some point as well too. So same idea there. But throughout it, I agree with you. The story that always resonated with me and resonated with a lot of folks is the Londo and Shakar. And I think a lot of that comes from, as you mentioned, JMS, but also Peter Jurusik and Andreas Katsoulis, and their ability to just act the hell out of those parts and make you care. And as you said too, to make them feel their pain with them, because both of them had quite a bit.
There was a lot of that, and I think it was extremely deep. I find that, and even rewatching it, and I don't want to spoil too much for new viewers, but
I threw a spoiler warning on. Go for it. Go for it. They're on their own.
There was a particular episode And Claudia scolds me in this all the time, but because I'm terrible with episode names. But Coming of Shadows.
Yes.
When you see the reflection of what's happening in Narn with the bombardment.
Yes.
And finally the realization. And when I write, I'm writing something I work for Sony as well. I do narrative design for Sony. And that comes back a lot about the redemptive nature of what people believe to be the villain. Londo's seen as the villain when he's asked what he wants. He's very honest about it. We're all very scared when you say, what we want. We're all very scared of it, but Londo wasn't, because it was born of truth and it was born of honesty. And it was, that I think he could be condemned for how he answered, but it was truth. And he didn't realize he was abstracting a lot of that patriotism, abstracting a lot of how he felt about the Narn until he saw it, until he saw what he had really wrought. And there was a moment just when you see that reflection, it's like, oh my dear God, what have I done? It was very powerful.
Well, and we have a group of newbies who are watching the show for the first time, and we just finished Signs and Portents.
Yes.
The tragedy of Londo and the tragedy of many characters like that. I think when you have a great character written, you have these decision points, these points of, as Chikar would say, points of transition, and he always makes the wrong decision every single time, and you root for him because you love the character, you love Londo, but he always makes the wrong decision every single time. You're like, okay, here's the point where he can turn it around, and then he doesn't. But you continue to hope that one day he's going to turn it around. But the idea
he does. I think he does. I think that's why I actually love him.
Yeah, I
think there's a moment. And again, when the torture of Chikar, and he looks at Chikar as more than just the enemy. There's the empathy, and there's like, I didn't want this to happen to you. And then there's also that the moment whenever they kind of cross paths, and I've seen this recently, so it's in my memory. I have a terrible memory, Scott, now. But they cross each other's paths. That's basically like, pray we don't. Chikar says, you've freed my homeworld. Pray we never cross paths again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sadness within Londo because it's like he remembers what could have happened. That drink, that moment where they were having a drink, and he even goes back with the League of Non-Aligned Worlds where he's talking about Sheridan's plan, and he goes and he says, "Look, will you have this drink with me?" And Chikar won't. Even when Chikar is spiritually enlightened, he can't bring himself to it. But as you reach then later on in season 4, you see the transition. You see something happen, and Londo is a very tragic, Shakespearean tragic figure. I like to remember him, and I talked to Peter about this. I like to remember him whenever he's at his best in season 1, where he's drinking and he's gambling and he's got Garibaldi as a friend and he's
looking stunning in purple.
Yeah, and that's the sadness, because that's really, he's free and he falls in love. And he's happy, he's free, and then you see what happens. He's no longer free. It's very sad and tragic. So that's why I look at Londo as I think, heroic figure, because he goes through his own Gethsemane in a way, and he comes out the other end.
Which, by the way, is another amazing episode. Not the Londo, but it is.
It's Brad Dourif.
Oh yes. One of our newbies was like, I really expecting Brad Dourif to show up in this. I'm like, he will. Don't worry, he will.
I trained to be a priest when I was very, very, very young. I have to say, when I was very young, in my teens, and that story affected me. It was, this is the thing about the genius of JMS, that he doesn't shy away from religion. He shows how religion evolves. He shows the different types of religion and how everybody kind of just accepts it. It's a worldview. It's a worldview, and nobody's fighting amongst themselves. And there's this altruism within the monks. You see, that what are they dedicated to? The truth. What are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to eliminate the truth through the scripts, and they take those who have transgressed society, have had their minds wiped, and they give them new hope and new purpose. Yeah, I thought that was very powerful. That was very powerful. I think there's a hunger for Babylon 5. I think there's something about it, and it's not retro.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very poorly written science fiction out there. A lot of very poorly written franchise-based science fiction. I'm trying not to get myself into trouble. But when you look back in sort of the 90s science fiction, it's almost perfect. It's almost, they don't depict a utopian society, but they depict something that we should hope for, and then give us the reality behind it as well, which is very powerful. And what we've got now is something completely different. It's like, this is the way it should be, so this is the way it is. It's like, no, you need to strive for something. And you always have to have very, very powerful antagonists that are interesting. And I always find that's where it goes wrong. The antagonists, they're not powerful enough. They don't engage. And when you look at Babylon 5, they had, sort of very fluid antagonists. Obviously they had the shadows, but they gave way to something worse. So it was an escalation, but it was all very fluid. And, were the Vorlons antagonists as well when you look at Sebastian and what happens to him? Possibly. How much manipulation's there?
All those firstborns, man, they were all trouble.
Yeah, and Sheridan, I don't like Messiah figures because you know what's going to happen in the third act with the Messiah figure.
Yeah.
But Sheridan kind of peeled that back a bit. And I think it was because he wouldn't take shit. He wouldn't take shit from anybody, regardless of who they were. And that was pretty powerful. It's a brilliant series. And I think it'll continue to grow.
Well, that's the other thing too. You mentioned the view of the future that isn't utopian, but also isn't dystopian. And in doing this podcast for a bit, I have really been impressed with the fan base of Babylon 5. You see so much in the way of toxicity among some fan bases.
Yes.
It's not there for Babylon 5. It's just not. I've now dived headlong into the community, and everyone, for the most part, is a positive person, and everyone is working towards the same kind of idea that we just love these stories, we love these characters, and we want to continue to talk about them and potentially perpetuate them in other forms as we go along. And it's honestly very refreshing to see a fan base that doesn't try to eat its own. You know what I mean?
Well, Kosh would have had a third question.
Yes.
What have you learned?
Yes. Very much so.
And that's the difference. That's the difference in the fan base. It's the what have you learned? And as I say, I've given an example of what I've learned. And that was, for me at 10 years of age, we really were taught to hate and kill each other. At that age, we were taught that was the other side. You'll do everything you can to hurt and kill the other side. And I mean, my wife lived in Ireland with me for 16 months, and she couldn't believe it. People wearing masks and having guns in the streets and all sorts of things. That still goes on. And I remember as a kid just watching, it was London, Chicago. It was like, I spoke to Peter about it, and I said, "You don't get this." It's very powerful for people who live in a conflict-driven society. So I think they're the most powerful characters. Of course, I love all the characters, but for me, particularly, they're the two that I remember. And then on another watch through now, obviously, I'm looking at Garibaldi. Is one of my favorite characters. Bester. I think Bester's just an incredible. Because again, he's not really a villain. If you look at it from his perspective, he's getting fucked. He's getting fucked over. I mean, nobody asked to be born a telepath.
Yeah, he's just trying to protect his telepaths. That's all he's doing.
And he said, he wants a fair society for his people. Which we're denying essentially, and he's slightly Machiavellian, he's slightly Mephistophelian, because if you make a deal with him, you are making a deal with the devil. But it's those shades of grey that come in after repeated watches, and that's the interesting thing about Babylon 5. It's the repeated watches that make it even more powerful and resonant. Can you say that of maybe Next Generation, maybe Deep Space? I have a soft spot for Deep Space Nine as well.
DS9 is my favorite Trek, so you're not going to get any complaints from me.
Yeah, it was another one that I watched when I was growing up. It was about 11 or 12 or whatever it was. And again, the nature of it. And I think the underpinning is actually a spiritual one. It's a very spiritual one. You have, Cisco being a prophet. So you had Kirk, who's the explorer. You had Picard, who was the philosopher king. You had Cisco as the prophet. And then you had Janeway, who was the tyrant. But Cisco as the prophet. Was very interesting. And you have that to a certain point with Sheridan as well, where he becomes the prophet / Messiah. And Kosh has been grooming him all this time. And Kosh is the anomaly. I think with the Vorlons, Kosh is somebody who actually does give a damn.
Yeah. The fact that they can make Kosh into a father figure before it's all said and done, and I'm looking forward to when our newbies see that. Yeah. That's
just whenever he becomes when he reveals himself.
Yeah.
Everybody except Londo doesn't see anything. He feels desolate. Mm-hmm. He really feels desolate. He hasn't saw anything. It's like I saw nothing. Why? Well, he's betrayed his soul. The soul's gone. Faust does this. Faust betrays his soul for experience. Mephistopheles. And I think that's who Morden represents. Morden's Mephistopheles. He's smooth. He's cunning. He's conniving. He's Mephistopheles, and he leads Lando through so many experiences that Lando believes he wants. But the one experience Lando has always wanted is to be loved and to have friends, and that evades him during season 2, season 3, season 4. Season 4, he starts to come back a little bit, but it's very sad. And that's why I think he's the character that I understand the most. It's very Shakespearean, it's very tragic, and it's something we all live in danger of, with aspirations and hopes and dreams. The dark side of that and what it can cost us.
But you are
very well written character.
You are right, though. At the end of the day, it takes a lot of alcohol and the hands of Jakar to do it, but at the end of the day, Londo does redeem himself and moves on as way he can.
It's a lovely thing. There's a sacrificial thing too, but he sees it. Everything's done in prophecy.
Yes.
So I always ask the question, how much choice did any of them have? And it's quite disturbing when you think about it. The prophecy of the technomages, the sort of psychic sensitive Centauri lady that he encounters. And it's like he's doomed from the start. And he knows he is. He sees it. He sees it all coming to pass. And that's why he turns to a lot of alcohol as well. Because he can't. It's like through alcohol he's free almost. And then you see that whenever he is the keeper. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's a fascinating series. And I'm not sure it's truly appreciated in the way that it should be. Because as I say to people who say, we should never do this, we should never remake it. And I say, there are many more stories to tell in this universe.
Absolutely.
And I think because the universe is dear to all our hearts, we need those stories to be told. And I think this is the time to do it.
Agreed. Well, and the guy who, it's not like a lot of these reboots, the guy who originally came up with the idea is saying, I have more ideas. So yeah, hell yeah. Show me.
Yeah,
bring them on.
I wanted to. I mean, I was very disappointed with the B5 comics because they were crap, and some of the books were brilliant. The Cyborg books were brilliant, stuff like that. But I mean, that's where Dark Legacies really came from. So Claudia came to me and said, I know you'll be able to write something that will be fun and cool, and just can we do this? And I said, yeah, of course. But what's nice about it is it's almost running in parallel with Babylon 5 coming back. And
well, hopefully we'll see what happens. I continue to refresh JMS's Patreon, going, come on.
I think it will happen. I'm not sure in what form it will happen.
Yeah, that's the question too, and that's my thought as well.
It'll happen in the form that it needs to happen. Yeah. Television is one medium. Mm-hmm. I personally, television's okay. But I think you can get a lot more done in a novel and in graphic novels than you can with television, and with a fraction of the budget. So,
well, hell, look at Nicholas Meyer is taking his con story and making it into a podcast because they wouldn't make it for a TV. So
yeah, and I think JMS is determined. And I think he's driven by particular muses. And I think those muses will probably give him the way forward. I think, it's weird for me. I've had blockers and stuff, and they've just disappeared because there's stories I've had to tell in the Dracula universe mostly, and they've happened. The most unlikely thing. I mean, I'm the most unlikely person you'll ever meet, Scott. I mean, to be running a Dracula franchise with Stoker family, that was insane for a start, let alone writing for Terminator and Doctor Who and all that stuff in a year. So that proves that what people term as the impossible can't happen. Is the CW the right vehicle for it? Maybe it won't be. Maybe somebody else is going to step in and turn around and say, you know what? We love your current idea and we'll take it onwards. Because I think we have to be careful that it's not that we love the Babylon 5 from the 90s. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of doing it because we're duty bound. It has to be, we love what you're going to do now.
Yes. And
let's do it. So let's see what happens. I have hope and faith in the great maker. I think it will. I think it will work out. There might be many trials and tribulations, but trials and tribulations lead to good stories at conventions.
That they do. So in terms of what you got going on now, is there anything else that you want to hit on or talk about that we haven't chatted about yet?
Just that issue 2 is being prepared. It's getting ready. We do have another Babylon 5 main cast member joining us, but on pain of death, I'm not allowed to release who that is until a Kickstarter. I can say that Pat Talman's come on board.
Yeah, you announced that a couple of days ago.
So that's fine. Yeah, because Pat released it, and he was so excited, and I was like, "Oh God, I can't suppress this." And she went, and she got new headshots for the artists, and so thank you, Pat, for that.
I'm not actually surprised that she would be the one to leak her own story. She seems to be that kind of character.
Yeah, she's a lovely lady, and she plays Claudia's sister, evil fraternal twin sister. Evil, she actually is quite, so yeah, she's a fantastic lady, and I think I love the fact that everybody's just really going for it and really enjoying this. Yeah. So I'm going on a journey with the cast members of Babylon 5, which is a bit surreal, but I just come along with us. I'm crafting this with the cast members. It's not Babylon 5. It's something new, but it's kind of why this all started was because we wanted to give the fans something. And this is obviously in the days before the CW reboots and all sorts of things we wanted to do something. So it was, so, come with us on our journey. We do have, we're talking about comic books, but we do have, short stories going out in anthologies, we've got novellas. I've just signed a deal for 3 games. There's a video game and there's audio dramas. So there's a lot for everybody to sort of get their teeth into. If they come and they join the Facebook group, Claudia Christian's Dark Legacies, I'm dropping little clips of audio dramas from various sci-fi stars from the worlds of Doctor Who and Babylon 5 as well. Little clips of those. I'm also dropping free stories in there, so you can dip your toes in, have a look. And you'll get all the news about the various games and stuff that are coming out.
Awesome. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes below. So if you want to join up on that Facebook group, you can find that down below. So I'm looking at your bio, and I have to do this because my brother will hate me if I don't. My brother runs his own podcast called Beyond the Mouse.
Yes.
And I do see that you did some work with Terry Hardin Jackson. And so I would love to hear a little bit about that, just so I can rub it in Craig's face and say that I talked to you before he did.
Terry's a lovely lady. How did I start this? So Terry contacted me because a mutual friend had gone on one of Terry's retreats, and she's a very talented artist. Terry came to me and said, "Show me something of your art." I am not a talented artist in any way, shape, or form. I dabble. I am lucky that I've worked with William Shatner on his Manowar War series. I've done bits and pieces with Judge Dredd. I actually sent her some of my Judge Dredd stuff, and she loved it. And it was like, this is the stuff that I really enjoy. And we had a friend, we built a friendship, and we started working together on like Star Wars stuff. And actually, quite recently, we wrote the Boba Fett story together, which went up online. And I have to be careful what I say, but it was in keeping with the classic understanding of Boba Fett, where he was quite a hardcore bounty hunter. She's a classic Star Wars fan, so we've worked together on some Star Wars stuff, and I'm actually writing her biography. So yeah, and she has one hell of a resume. I mean, she worked on Ghostbusters. She's worked on Men in Black. She's done a hell of a lot of stuff. She's worked on Star Wars. She's, and she's an amazing lady. And I term her as one of my mentors because, yeah, she kind of helped form me. And she does this great Patreon, and she tries to help other creatives and foster their talents as well through that.
I'm trying to figure out, Chris, when you actually sleep.
I don't.
Exactly.
I kind of work for, I mean, there is a joke because obviously I work in Dracula now, and there's a joke. I do have an allergy to garlic. I can't wear silver because and I work about 16 to 17 hours a day. That's the truth. I mean, I've got 30 stories out this year and games out and all sorts of things going on. I think it's like the ultimate rush. I mean, I don't need cocaine. It's just creation's the ultimate rush, So it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed it, and I've been lucky. I've been praised by for my horror stuff. I've been praised by Stephen King, and I've been horror. I was poet of the month of June, I think, for the Horror Writers Association. I do mentorship for Horror Writers Association and sci-fi. I've won awards, and really all that distills down to is that you just keep writing until something sticks. If you're listening to this and you're a writer, you're an aspiring writer, it's like keep going and treat it like a job. Actually set hours for yourself to write and achieve goals. And yeah.
Well, and as you said earlier, you're living the hell out of your life, and that just sounds like an excellent way to spend that time.
Yeah, I'm diagnosed as terminally ill. So, if people research me to find that out. So, cancer. I've been fighting that for 4 years now. So, and like last year I was in a wheelchair and the doctors thought I was going to just drop down dead at any time. So I just decided, and it was like, fuck it, I'm going to live this life. I love video games. I love writing stories. And I've been very fortunate that people have enjoyed my stories. So what I've been doing now is trying to mentor people and try and get them to embrace their life. And if they want to be creatives, if they want to draw, if they want to be in film, if they want to do audios, if they want to do stories, I try and help them with that because that's what life's really about. That's really the secret joy of life. To be honest, it's helping other people to get to where they want to be.
Well, Chris, I definitely appreciate the time you've given us, and I would love to keep discussing this stuff with you as you continue to build this universe along with everything else you're working on too. So hopefully you won't be a stranger on this. And again, if you want to do any kind of other plug-in, feel free to do it now, and we'll wrap this sucker up.
I suppose I should. So we've got the Dracula. If you don't mind me talking about the Dracula stuff for a bit.
Do it. Hey, do what you want.
So we've got our official Dracula sequel. So if I say official, it's the first time that a member of the Stoker family has been involved in a Dracula sequel. Dexter Stoker's a great grandnephew of Bram Stoker. He's an international best-selling author as well, and a great friend. So we have that coming out. That's going to be hitting stores very soon. We also have for games, we've got a RPG that's coming out, Stokerverse RPG, illustrated by Clint Langley. Most Warhammer 40k fans and comic fans know. And we've got a miniature war game coming out in the Dracula universe, and also a Castlevania-style video game, which will be in Steam, PS4, PS5, Xbox, and Game Boy cartridge.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I've decided we would go retro, so it's going to be shoehorned into a Game Boy Color cartridge, and Decker will sign those cartridges, and they'll be limited editions. So there you are.
That's amazing. As a child of the '80s, I approve.
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, one of my jobs, I work for a company called Antstream, and it's all about it's an online arcade company. And yeah, that's one of my dream jobs, just working with, Pac-Man and Space Invaders and, all those kind of games, all those classic games. And yeah, I'm a gamer. I'm just the ultimate geek, Scott. I'm a gamer. I'm somebody who likes comic books. I love audio dramas. I love RPGs. That's something I've recently get into. So yeah, I have a very rewarding life. And so I'm very grateful for it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And again, I'll have all the links down in the show notes. So please be sure to check out Dark Legacies and everything that they're doing over there, as well as I'll link out to some of the other stuff that Chris is working on as well, too. So you can check that out as well. And Chris, I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to chat with me. And then, like I said, hopefully we can do this again, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure. I've been following your podcast, and yeah, well, there'll probably be next time there'll be somebody with probably a special guest coming on, hopefully, and we can talk.
I hope.
Yeah. We can chat more about their perspective of Dark Legacies.
Excellent.
Being the writer, I have one perspective, but I term them as cast members. Cast members will have their perspective as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's great to kind of have that ability to work together to kind of build this thing out with all these different perspectives, which doesn't always happen. So allowing cast and the authors and everybody to work together, I'm sure helps to build out that story as well too.
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoy it.
Thank you for listening to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Grey17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Grey 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Grey 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing Babylon 5 themes are available from Falling Matter on YouTube.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
What's going on? You all look like a park mirage just ate your cat.